Using your measurements to customize your bedspread banyan cutting diagram. Did I say this one was easier? The diagram modification method for the bedspread banyan is actually a little harder. You had an easier time on the measuring because you had less measurements to do. And you will have an easier time on the construction because the construction of this is simpler than the other project. But the diagram modification method for the bedspread banyan includes something that makes it a little bit more difficult to tell you exactly what to do. And that is, while you need the measurement only of your back neck to floor and your back neck to wrist view, there's another measurement you need to do. You need to measure the bedspread or the sheet, you can use a bed sheet for this, that you intend to use. You can use a quilt, you can use a sheet, you can use a bedspread, you can use a twin one, you can use a king one. They're different sizes, they're different shapes, and I can't tell you exactly what to do because I can't exactly look at the particular thing that you're working on. You're going to have to wing a little bit of these parts of the directions. So this section is a little bit harder than doing the 1 hour dress. If you've not already collected your measurements, watch the video on how to do this again and do so. Measure your back neck to floor, measure your back neck to wrist. If you haven't printed out or downloaded and put on the device, the PDF diagram for the generic bedspread banyan, do that also. There's a link there for where you can go and do that. Now here you can see the banyan diagram, and you can see the banyan that I made that is that diagram. I took a block printed bedspread and I approximately figured out how you can go and make that work as a garment. I made the sleeves a little too long, so I would probably modify it again. But in general, the idea is that you use the lower part to be the torso, and the place on the diagram that is marked C here, that is where your back neck is. Also, these two C's end up being on me right here where it goes in it. They attach to this back here in that spot. So the sides go up like what I'm doing here. It's the equivalent of going here. This is going to attach back to there. And this is going to attach back there. And then these will be the armhole slots into which we will stick the sleeves. Now, I think I kind of got lucky. I used my back neck to floor measurement to be this, and that made it a little bit long, but not so much that I would trip over it. This is actually the most important measurement you're going to end up using, is that back neck to floor. The other parts are what is your leftover, and you can decide how you make those into sleeves, or in this case, sleeves and lining. But there are other things that having a larger or smaller kind of bedspread will make a difference on. Now, so you can visualize this diagram as the banyan that you just saw. I want to go and draw your attention again to C, which is where this goes there, and this goes there, and the armholes at A match up to this spot here, and the top part of the sleeve that goes into that armhole also ends up at A, and the armpits down here are B, and the two ends of the sleeves end up there on either side. And that's how this thing is laid out. So you want to go and make sure that on this measurement, on your thing, you want this and this to not be any longer than your back neck to floor measurement. If this part ends up being longer than your back neck to wrist, this won't be a problem. However, you want to make sure as you're cutting out this upper part that whatever you do from here to here, from C to A, like that to that, plus whatever is your A to the edge, whatever that is, the A to the edge, those two together are not less than your back neck to wrist, or at least not too much less, unless you want to have short sleeves, in which case you can. Now this illustrates why it is that you might want to have one where it is longer than that. That is to say, where the amount that goes from the back neck to, let's see, pick this color. No, let's make it in screaming green. Where this to here ends up being longer than your back neck to wrist in the cutting. You want to do that because you've got this bedspread that has this amazing pattern on it that has edges to it. And if you just cut it out like it's regular fabric, you're going to miss all of that neat pattern. So you can make one where it is considerably bigger of a T to one side than will actually go over your arm. The trick is in here you can see there's a series of pleats that we make after the fact that allows this to still fit and not be too long on your arms. You make it as a bigger T but can tuck it in. You can't do that vertically or it will end up being a strange bunchy mess, but you can do that across the shoulders fairly easily. So to review again, what you want to do is you want to go and measure that back neck to floor and make sure this is not longer than the back neck to floor. Otherwise you will trip. And you want to measure from C to A and A to the sleeve, the cuff, like this and this, and make sure you make that so that it is at least your back neck to wrist measurement. That's what you're trying to do on this diagram. You're trying to make sure this is less than the back, neck to wrist, and this is the same as or more than this one can be more. It's best if it's exactly your back, neck to wrist. This one can be less. This is best if it's just an inch or two less than your back, neck to floor. But if this one is bigger or this one is smaller, you're still okay. That's where you're using the measurements. Now, if you end up with one because you have a very big bedspread and you're trying to make the cool pattern on the thing fit, you will perhaps end up with something like the yellow wizardy looking thing that I had, where this section here, because it's on a bigger scale, this is much bigger. It's more like if this were, well, bigger. And so what would actually be the shape of this would be something kind of like way out to here, and then a little bitty sleeve, and like that. And the same thing on the other side, where you'd have something that has the sleeve about a normal size, but the body of the thing is much larger. That's okay. Remember I said if this section ends up being on this, the measurement of the back, neck to wrist part ends up being bigger than that, that's fixable. If the part from the back, neck to floor ends up being shorter than this, that's plausible. Those are the two measurements you need, because those are the two measurements you need to worry about. The part from C to A and A to the edge needs to be at least long enough to go to your wrists, and from C down to the bottom, that needs to be not longer than your feet, or it'll be pooling around you and you'll trip. Okay? Now, the reason it doesn't matter if you had that big section where the center part was too big is you can take this thing, and once you've made the giant t-shirt shape, you then go and put it on and make a series of pleats on the shoulders. Basically, you take tucks in there that end up going like this on the shoulders, which is how you get this nice little edge there, the edge there, and the edge there. It's just little hidden tucks that you stitch in place just for a few inches up around the shoulder area. And that goes and controls the fullness and allows you to keep the cool pattern of the bedspread with the edges intact. And actually gives you a nice big soft floppy robe, which is very good if you're going to like a Harry Potter convention or something. And it doesn't cause you problems. It's just a place where you can do extra pleats. So you're paying attention in your measurements to what you have as a bedspread, making sure this part does not get too long and you trip over it. So your back, neck to floor or less, and that this part, the part that goes from here to here ends up being not shorter than your back, neck to wrist. And if you end up doing those two things, all the rest you can work out with pleats, even if you have a very large bedspread. There is also one other issue. You will see the bedspread that I've got that I'm sitting on right here. It doesn't have the pattern in the same places as my diagram. The pattern actually goes all the way around. There isn't a spot at the top where there's a blank thing. As a result, if I use these sections to be the sleeve, I will end up with something that has a pattern on one side and then a whole little thing going on there. What's going to actually work better for me on this is if I use this piece, which has the pattern just on one edge. So this part will get flipped, and this will become my sleeve on this particular bedspread. This is what I mean by you have to pay attention to the size and the shape of your bedspread and the pattern on it. You want to go and get the most aesthetically pleasing thing out of it as you can with the least amount of work. You still go and get to make this out of a series of rectangles, and the sewing on this is mindlessly simple. But the cutting for this reason is something that I can't just have you plug in numbers like we do on the 1 hour dress. There's a lot of numbers to plug into the 1 hour dress. It's no picnic, but this one, you have to get a little creative in how you do it. So pay attention that this to this is not longer than that back neck to the hem, or rather the back neck to hem, back neck to wrist or floor ends up, if it's too long, you're going to trip over it. And you want to make sure that the measurement from here to here and here to here, which corresponds to your back neck to wrist, is not shorter than your back neck to wrist, or you're going to have funny short sleeves. So unless you want funny short sleeves, don't do that. And you want to pay attention to where the pattern is, so that if you have a pattern that's around here, all the way around, instead of cutting my sleeves where I want to have that pattern there, on the latest thing, I'm going to go and cut it out of what would be the sleeve lining section, and not this section that has the pattern going in this funky fashion. So in each case, you make slight alterations based on what you have for the body of the bedspread. You're modifying the pattern to your two measurements and to the bedspread's measurements and the bedspread's layout. And that is your job on this particular